नमो तस्य भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स नमो तस्य भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स नमो तस्य भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स. So today we are going to start studying the part 2 of the book 4, and in which we are going to look at the terminology, how similarities in terminology conceal fundamental difference. Okay, so the heading of the part 2 is that there are similar terminologies, and because of the similar terminologies, the fundamental differences are concealed. And I think this is very important to understand the heading of this part 2, how similarities in terminology. So there are similar terminologies shared by Buddhism and other philosophical schools of the time or other traditions of the time. The words are the same, but they conceal the fundamental difference. So we know that when Baba Ambedkar undertook to write the Buddha and his Dhamma, there were 4 problems he faced, and one of the problems that he faced was about the doctrine of soul, of karma and rebirth, and how to understand that, because there is an apparent contradiction. So what I will do, I will begin with reading the introduction where Baba Ambedkar talks about the karma and rebirth. So the third problem relates to the doctrines of soul, of karma and rebirth. The Buddha denied the existence of the soul. We all know that the Buddha denied the existence of the soul, but he is also said to have affirmed the doctrine of karma and rebirth. So Baba Ambedkar says that that it is said to have affirmed the doctrine of karma and rebirth. At once a question arises: if there is no soul, how can there be karma or karma? So that's one question. If there is no soul, how can there be rebirth? These are baffling questions. In what sense did the Buddha use the words karma and rebirth? So we have to look at the what is called a semantic or the linguistic side of these words, karma and rebirth. So on one level, we have to understand the terminologies. What do the, because the words look similar, but what do they really mean? We have to understand the semantics or the meaning of the words. Did he use them in a different sense than the sense in which they were used by the Brahmins of his day? If so, in what sense? Did he use them in the same sense in which the Brahmins used them? If so, is there not a terrible contradiction between the denial of soul and the affirmation of karma and rebirth? This contradiction needs to be resolved. So this is about karma and rebirth, but there are other 2 categories which are there. They look similar compared to the traditions that existed at the time. So there are 4 sections in this part 2. One is about rebirth. Second is about karma. The third section is about ahimsa. And the 4th section is about transmigration. And the 5th and the small section is about the causes of these misunderstandings. Okay. So we know that in our community or everywhere, this discussion on the rebirth goes on all the time. And it's sometimes people bring so many things to the discussion, and they like to know whether we what happens after the death, and these are all natural intriguing questions for all of us as to what happens after our death. So this is a very charged sort of a discussion on rebirth, and people have a lot of concepts. They pick up things here and there from Pali text, and there's a lot of discussion all the time. As we all know, that the rebirth is a very, I would say, not only controversial, contradictory, but also controversial in a sense of causing so much of a discussion. So I think here what we are going to do is try to understand what is called the Baba Saheb's understanding of this terminologies. Okay. So there is, on one level, we have to understand the language or the linguistic meaning of it. On the other hand, we have to understand what may be the contextual meaning of that in the Buddhist text. And third is, on the level of reality as to what is the death. What happens after the death? These are the questions that, everybody is trying to seek the answer of. So let's begin with the exploration of it. And I think Baba Saheb Ambedkar has offered a very meticulous explanation of it, and we have to study it very thoroughly. So let's begin with the preliminary, as Baba Saheb Ambedkar begins this section 1 on rebirth with preliminaries. What happens after death is a question often asked. We all want to know what happens after death. This is a very important question for all of us. And the contemporaries of the Buddha held two different views. One set was called eternalist, and the other was called annihilationist. Means in the Indic languages, we can call them Shashvatvad and Uchchedvad. So there are two sort of views at the time of the Buddha. Even today, these views are prevalent. One is called the eternal, and one is called the annihilation of what happens after death. So eternal, of course, means something which is going to last forever, and annihilationist means something is going to be completely destroyed. So annihilation means complete destruction. If we look at the word uchched, total uchched, complete total destruction, and eternal means is going to last forever. So let's keep these two concepts in mind. And we know that the Buddha was not an eternalist, and Buddha was not an annihilationist. He was the follower of what is called the middle path, which is, according to the Buddha, is the nature of everything, that is sunya, and ultimately paticca samutpada. So Buddha was found that the reality of the world is paticca samutpada, dependent origination, dependent co-origination. So of course we know the thesis of annihilationists was summed up in one word, uchchedvad, which means that death is the end of everything. There is nothing left after death. Okay, so that's the position of the people who believed in annihilation. There is nothing left after death. That's one point of view. The Buddha was not an eternalist, because we know that the Buddha taught the doctrine of anicca, impermanence. So Buddha was not an eternalist. And also, to be an eternalist, it involved a belief in the existence of a separate, immortal soul, to which he was opposed. So, Buddha in his experience found that there doesn't exist anything within us or outside us which is permanent, which never changes, and which is immortal. So that was the position of the what is called the eternalist. So was the Buddha an annihilationist? With his belief in the non-existence of the soul, the Buddha would naturally be expected to be an annihilationist. So because the Buddha didn't believe in the eternalism, Shashwat, so we can think that we will expect that the Buddha is teaching the complete destruction. But in the Alagga Dupamma Sutta, the Buddha complains that he is called an annihilationist, when as a matter of fact he is not. So Buddha has denied this charge of being called the annihilationist, because the Buddha was not an annihilationist. So this is what the Buddha said. Though this is what I affirm and what I preach, yet some recluses and Brahmins wrongly, erroneously, and falsely charge me in defiance of facts with being an annihilanist and with preaching the disintegration, destruction, and extirpation of human beings. So is Buddha really teaching what is called the disintegration, destruction, and extirpation of human beings? It is just what I am not, the Buddha says, and what I do not affirm, that is wrongly, erroneously, and falsely charged against me by these good people who would make me out to be an annihilanist. If the statement is a genuine one and is not an interpolation by those who wanted to foist a Brahminic doctrine on Buddhism, the statement raises a serious dilemma. Okay. How can the Buddha not believe in the existence of the soul and yet say that he is not an annihilationist? This raises the question, did the Buddha believe in rebirth? Okay, now this is the preliminary. And I thought before we enter into the discussion on rebirth, we have to have a few things ready with us. Number one is that, Buddha says that sabbe satta marana dhamma. We all are going to die. One day, everybody has to die. And the Buddha didn't make or glorify the death, or the Buddha didn't philosophize on death. He just accepted the death as a natural phenomena. There is nothing mysterious or mystic about death. It is the truth that is going to happen to all of us. And the Buddha very, very, very clearly said, we all know that, the death is a reality. We are all going to die. And we all fear death. Everybody fears death. Unless we are Jivana Mukta. One of the definition of the Arhanta is Jivana Mukta, one who is free from this life. So all of us have a natural craving to live, maybe to live forever. That is a Trishna, that is a desire in all of us to live forever, unless we are really enlightened. And that desire to be is the Bhavatanna. We all want to live forever, to be, to exist forever. So that's why these questions of what happens after death are so crucial, because we as a human being or any animal have this sense of what is called the permanent self. And we know that psychologically we need to have some sense of self so that we survive in the world. But if we analyze, if we meditate on our body, on our mind, on our feelings, we discover that nothing like any concrete, any permanent entity exists. So we are trying to create the answers for the question, what happens after death? So these questions are very difficult ones. They are very important ones, and they are so emotionally provocative that we all want to know, all want to have discussion, all want to find some sort of refuge in something, that we are somehow going to exist after death. And this is, I think, a very important, contradictions of life, that whatever we try to do, how much we try to escape, we cannot escape death. We are going to die. We cannot cheat death ever. So, because of this nature of questions, they are bound to, I would say, lead to a lot of emotional discussions. So I think here in this particular section, Baba Ambedkar has, I would say, attempted a very interesting sort of an explanation. And this was also one of the points that the traditional Buddhists didn't like. that about the way Baba Ambedkar has presented the rebirth and karma. And some of their reviews of Buddha and Dhamma, they are like trying to claim that Baba Ambedkar has missed the point of rebirth. One of the reviewers says that Baba Ambedkar was having a political motive, not the spiritual motive, so he missed it, and so on and so forth. Of course, these criticisms are rubbish because they have not studied Buddha and Dhamma deeply, or any of the teachings, or any of the the way Baba Ambedkar has understood the Dhamma. And I think that's a very unique understanding of Baba Ambedkar that we need to understand for ourselves. So the section 2 begins with a very important question: rebirth of what? So if we say just rebirth, and there are words like punarjanma, or people have been using the word now punarbhava, and then there is another word in the Buddhist philosophy, antarabhava, and then there is another word patisandhi. These are all words there, and so many words are there, and we have to juggle with so many terminologies. So I think what approach we have to take is to really find a way to enter into discussion about karma and rebirth. So Baba Ambedkar asked a question: rebirth of what? Did the Buddha believe in rebirth? Now, did the Buddha believe in rebirth? The answer is in affirmative. The answer is yes. Yes, the Buddha believed in rebirth. But is it the same like the way Brahmins believed or taught? Or is it different? So to understand this, it is better to split this question further into two parts. Number one, rebirth of what and rebirth of whom. So you see, we cannot just accept anything without knowing or understanding it. A lot of people say that we don't have to think rationally to understand these concepts. We have to think intuitively. We have to think with other levels of thinking. But if the Buddha's teaching cannot be understood rationally, and if we put it in the realm of something which cannot be explained, only can be explained and experienced by certain people, certain chosen few, I don't think the Buddha will accept that kind of a ground, because everything that the Buddha has taught has the universal appeal, because everybody can experience it, everybody can know it, everybody can understand it, and because everybody can know and understand it, everybody can if they are properly taught, they can know the rationale of it, isn't it? So let's understand how Baba Ambedkar has approached it, because I think this is a very beautifully approached by Baba Ambedkar, and it goes very deep when we discuss it in the now. So rebirth of what and rebirth of whom? It is better to take each one of these two questions separately. Here we may take the first, rebirth of what. So the question now asked is rebirth of what? Now you pay your close attention. This question is almost always ignored, because we almost ignore this question, rebirth of what? We only talk about rebirth, but we don't ask this question, rebirth of what? What is going to get rebirth? What is going to get reborn? What is going to have the regeneration, or coming again and again? What is going to come again and again? This question is almost always ignored. It is because of the mixing of two questions that so much confusion has arisen. According to the Buddha, now look at the Buddha, what Buddha says. According to the Buddha, there are 4 elements of existence which go to compose the body. Now you say, the 4 elements of existence. Please pay your attention to this phrase, 4 elements of existence. They are not called the 4 elements of existence of just us. The capital E says that in the world there are elements, right? Like there are mountains, there are water bodies, there is fire, there is wind. These all elements are there, and these 4 elements which go to compose the body. So they go to compose the body. the human body is composed of the 4 elements: Prithvi, Aap, Tej, Vayu. Now these 4 elements we can understand in terms of the science as, the nature of solid, the nature of liquid, the nature of wind, the nature of fire, plasma, so on and so forth. Okay, and those who have studied medicine, or those who are knowing about the physiology of body, they will know that how the process of the human being, how they are born, and what happens at that level. And Baba Ambedkar has also gone into discussing that, about what happens in when the fetus is conceived. So you see, these bodies are composed of the 4 elements, and the 4 elements are, we know that they always undergo the changes. The Prithvi, Aap, Tej, Vayu, they undergo the changes. That's what our bodies are made up of. Different combination and different proportions. Our bodies are made up of that. Like we know that we have 70% water in our body. So, and this is one of the very interesting sort of the Buddha's teaching is to be mindful of these 4 elements within us. We have to learn to be mindful of these 4 elements within us. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, Mangesh, very much.
Yes, Mangesh, you are audible.
I think, Alka madam, that's your problem.
Voice is breaking.
Am I audible? Clearly audible to you all?
Yes, Alka madam's voice is breaking.
Yes.
I think
Okay.
Alka madam's internet issue.
Okay.
So you see, what I'm trying to get it at is, Buddha has taught us to be mindful of the bodies. So we have to be mindful of these elements within us. We can be, mindful of the element of solidity in us, of liquidity in us, and we can understand them as elements, like the way the chemistry people or the chemists, people who study chemistry can understand. So the question is, when the human body dies, what happens to these elements? Do they also die along with dead body? Some say that they do. So what happens when we are dead? When we die, these elements of which our bodies are made up of, what happens to them? According to some people, they think that they also die. The Buddha said no. They join the mass of similar elements floating in Akash space. Okay, this is about body. Very interesting. Now there will be naturally the discussion on what is called the consciousness or mind. We will come to that. Okay. When the 4 elements from this floating mass join together, a new birth takes place. So, at the level of element means at the level of, very elementary particles. You might have heard about elementary particles in physics. If we study, we talk about elementary particles, because, if we break down this whole things into atom and into nucleus and electrons and protons, how the different molecules are formed, like hydrogen, oxygen, they are very basic building blocks. We won't go into that, but you understand, you get a sense of what are the elements, and everything in the world is made up of certain elements, the combination of all these elements, everything in the world is made up of. The elements need not and are not necessarily from the same body which is dead. They may be drawn from different bodies. It must be noted that the body dies, but the elements are ever living. So the elements or matter cannot be destroyed. And that is what the physics has proved, that matter cannot be destroyed. It transforms into energy, and energy transforms into matter. That is what Einstein has taught, that the mass and the energy are interconvertible. Nothing, they cannot be destroyed. They cannot be destroyed. This is kind of rebirth in which the Buddha believed. Okay. Now this section that we are going to look into, little bit complicated, but if we pay our attention, we can know so much about not only about life and death, but about Buddhism itself. So I'm going to go very slowly on that. Great light is thrown upon the subject by Sariputta in his dialogue with Mahakotita. Very interesting sutta that Baba Ambedkar has picked up here. So we know Sariputta as the great disciple of the Buddha, and he was a co-at. Buddha has appreciated his understanding of the Dhamma. And interestingly, in this part, there are two prominent disciples of the Buddha which are going to come, Sariputta and Khema. So next we are going to look at Khema, what she has to say. But let's look at Sariputta and Mahakotita. So it is said that once when the Lord was staying at Shravasti in Jeta's grove in Anathapindaka's Arama, the Mahakotita rising up at eventide from his meditations. See, Mahakotita was meditating and he rose up at eventide. His mind was very settled. His mind was completely balanced. His mind has completely attained what is called the calmness of the mind. It's very important for us, anybody, to understand the truth, to achieve some calm or quietude of the mind. That is a very important key to understand or to be mindful to achieve that, the calm of mind. If our minds are agitated, we cannot see the way it is. So we need some level of calming down. And that was what was Mahakotita's mind at that time. And he went to Sariputra and asked him to elucidate some of the questions which troubled him. The following was one of them. So this is the question that Baba Ambedkar has picked up here. Very close attention, because this is very technical and very important for us to understand. So Mahakotita asked, how many factors has the first ecstasy dhyana put from it? How many does it retain? So when we talk about the Buddhist dhyana, there are various levels of dhyana: the first level, second level, third level, and fourth level. And Mahakotita is asking, how many factors has the first ecstasy dhyana put from it, and how many does it retain? Sariputta replied, 5 of each. Gone are lusts, malevolence, torpor, worry, and doubt. Observation, reflection, jest, satisfaction, and a focused heart persist. Very interesting. What happens in the first dhyana? So the 5 nivarana, which are traditionally called the covers of mind, they cover our mind and they don't let us see the way it is. Which are the 5 nivarana? And this discussion is so fundamental to the Buddhist practitioners that we need to understand it. Which are the 5 hindrances? Kamachanda, Vyapad, Thinamidda, Udaccha Kukuccha, and Vichikicha. And here Babas have translated Kamachanda as lust, Vyapad as malevolence, Thinamidda as torpor or sloth or the lazy mind, worry, fickleness of mind, Udaccha Kukuccha, and doubt, which is called the Vichikitsa. Okay, so these 5 hindrances are there. Because of them, we are not able to see the way it is. Because of them, we are not able to calm our minds down. Because of them, we are not able to attain what is called the samatha, or what is called the balanced or calm or quiet mind. Our minds are always agitated. And we will see how our minds are also agitated, always agitated. Okay. So when we apply this, what is called the 5 techniques, then what happens in the first dhyana is vitarka, vichar, piti, sukh, ekagrata. Technical words, but please understand, observation is vitarka, reflection is vichar, jest means priti, satisfaction is sukh, and focused mind, focused heart is ekagrata. Very interesting. So when we try to balance our mind, when we try to calm our mind, what we do? We choose an object. In our case, we choose the object of breathing, and we vitarka means we take our mind to that object. We are doing it all the time. Vitarka, vichar, we are doing all the time. That's how our mind works. But especially when we are trying to train our minds, what we do? We try to take our mind to that object. And that object or alamban in this case is the breathing. If we are practicing anapanasati, then when the mind is hovering around it, it's called the vichar. And when our mind is completely absorbed in that object, we experience what is called a piti or jest. And when the priti, when our mind is full of that highest supreme material joy that we can experience, then it completely becomes what is called the sukh. Sukh means the satisfaction. And when there is a sukha, that kind of a sukha, there is ekaggata. Ekaggata means all our energies are focused on that point. So that is what happens in the first dhyana. Please attention, please pay close attention. Very interesting discussion. Okay. Verse number 19, very important. Mahakotita asked, take the 5 senses of sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. Then Mahakotita further asked, very interesting for even those who are practicing meditation or practicing any of the Buddha's teachings. Mahakotita asked, take the 5 senses of sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch, each with its own particular province and range of function, separate and mutually distinct. So these senses through which we experience the word, like the word of sight, word of sound, word of smell, word of taste, and word of touch, they each have their own province. Different indriya have a different, what is called the province and the range of function. But they are separate and mutually distinct. What eye experiences, the ear cannot. What the ear experiences, the nose cannot. So they have a different sort of, mutually distinct functions. What ultimate base they have? Who enjoys all their 5 provinces and ranges? Very interesting. So we know that these 5 senses, their base is the mana. That's why in Buddhism we call 6 senses. Chadayatana. 6 senses, okay? So all these things brought by the 5 senses are integrated in what is called the mana. That's why even when we sleep, we can still see dreams. We can still hear voices. We can sometimes smell. Why? Because the mana is the ultimate, experiencer of all this. Okay. So who enjoys all their 5 provinces and ranges? Mana, mind. Now listen carefully. On what do these 5 faculties of sense depend? So these 5 faculties of sense depend on what? On vitality. So vitality. If there is no vitality, there will not be mind, there will not be sense faculties. On what does vitality depend? Sariputta answers, on heat. Mahakotita asked, on what does heat depend? Sariputta replied, on vitality. Mahakotita asked, you say that the vitality depends on heat, and you also say that heat depends on vitality. What precisely is the meaning to be attached to this? Sariputta replied, I will give you an illustration. Just as in the case of a lamp, the light reveals the flame and the flame reveals the light. So vitality depends upon heat and heat depends on vitality. Very interesting. This discussion is very interesting. So now Mahakotita asked, how many things must quit the body before it is flung aside and cast away like a senseless log? See, the dead body is equated in Buddhism as the senseless log. dead body is equated with senseless log. So Mahakotita asked, how many things must quit the body before it is flung aside and cast away like senseless log? Sariputra answered, vitality, heat, and consciousness. So when the mind and vitality are dependent on each other, the vitality and heat are dependent on each other, and I think if we can, I don't know, if we can speculate about what is called now when they talk about the consciousness in the scientific domain, and there is a new school of thought that is coming, which is equating it with what is called the Krebs cycle, very complicated one, but we can Google and look into it, that now they are coming with how the consciousness might arrive, how we are aware of moment to moment happenings around us and in our bodies. So vitality, heat, and consciousness. Mahakotita asked, what is the difference between the lifeless corpse and an Alzheimer in trance in whom the perception and feelings are still? Listen carefully. So Mahakotita's question is not about life and death. Mahakotita's question is, he's asking that I have experienced this first dhyana, which is, as I have explained you in the verse number 19, that Sariputra replied about how the 5 neurons are gone and how the vitarka, vichar, piti, sukh, ekagrata is activated. So Mahakotita is asking, what is the difference between a dead man and a man who is in the deep meditation? Because it is said that when we meditate deeply, when our breath is quiet and down, then we don't need this physical breathing. We breathe through our skin. Okay, that's what it is said in the scriptures. So what is the difference between a lifeless corpse and an Alzheimer in trance whom perception and feelings are still? Because in that meditator's mind, the perceptions and feelings are stilled. Their mind cannot be agitated by any sensual stimulation. Sariputra replied, in the corpse, not only are the plastic forces of body and mind, body and speech and mind still and quiescent. So all the plastic forces which are going there, plastic forces means very, flexible forces which are there in our body, speech and mind, they are still and quiescent, but also vitality is exhausted, heat is quenched, and the faculties of sense broken up. This is what happens when we die. The plastic forces of the body and mind and speech are still and quiescent, but also vitality is exhausted, heat is quenched, and the faculties of sense broken up. Whereas in the Alsman or Bhikkhu, in meditation in trance, vitality persists, heat abides, and the faculties are clear, his sense doors are clear. Although respiration means our breathing, observation, our sadhya, and perception are stilled and quiescent. Very deep. So this is what happens in a deep meditation, and this is what happens when we die. Okay, in the deep meditation, the respiration is also stilled. The observation and perceptions are also stilled. So what do we experience in that? What that we have to experience for ourselves. But the Alsman in trance, the vitality persists, heat abides, and the faculties are clear. This probably is the best and most complete exposition of death or annihilation. Now, this is what happens when we die, and this is what happens when we deeply go into the samadhi. There is only one lacuna in this dialogue. Mahakotita should have asked Sariputra one question: what is heat? What answer would have given it is not easy to imagine, but there can be no doubt that heat means energy. Thus amplified, the real answer to the question, what happens when the body dies, is the body ceases to produce energy. Very interesting. Because all the time when we breathe in, the energy is produced in the body. The what is called the basic building blocks of life are produced by the body. And the science has gone into explaining it as to what happens, how the glucose is broken, and how the the energy is supplied to all parts of body, how oxygen is released. Those who are interested, they can look into that, the body continuously produces energy. Continuously it produces energy. And when the body ceases to produce energy, the body dies. But this is only a part of the answer, because death also means that whatever energy that has escaped from the body joins the general mass of energy playing about in the universe. Annihilation has therefore a twofold aspect. In one of its aspects, it means cessation of production of energy. In another aspect, it means a new addition to the stock of general floating mass of energy. It is probably because of this twofold aspect of annihilation that the Buddha said that he was not an absolute annihilationist. He was an annihilationist so far as soul was concerned. He was not an annihilationist so far as matter was concerned. So interpreted, it is easy to understand why the Buddha said that he was not an annihilationist. He believed in the regeneration of matter and not in the rebirth of soul. So the matter can be, recycled. It's like recycling. So this recycling goes on and on all the time in the world. So the matter is generated and regenerated. But there is no soul, so there cannot be anything that will be, that because there is nothing like soul. So, we cannot talk about the, regeneration or rebirth of the soul. So interpreted, the Buddha's view is in consonance with science. It is only in the sense that the Buddha could be said to have believed in rebirth. Energy is never lost. That is what science affirms. Annihilation, in the sense that after death, nothing is left, would be contrary to science, for it would mean that energy is not constant in volume. This is the only way by which the dilemma could be solved. Not easy, is very this thing. And as we go on, because in the next class also we are going to discuss rebirth, and we will look into that deeply. But the point of this discussion is to understand that because there is nothing permanent in us which cannot be transmigrated from this body to that body, and there is a concept that after death something in us leaves and goes into another body, and that's where the another birth takes place, because we have this very strong sense of self, which is the root cause of all our sufferings. And once we understand anatta, we are jivan mukta, we are free, because we understand that there is nothing to cherish that we call self. We understand that the self, or the experience of self, is just unconditioned, just a conditioned experience, like the several labels that we attach to the part of identities. And then some kind of stability or some kind of a feeling of self is needed to survive. Otherwise we will not be able to survive. But that doesn't mean that that self exists forever. We look at our lives from our childhood to our wherever we are at whatever age. Everything has undergone change. Your body has completely changed. From a child, we have now become an adult, and we are going to age, and we are going to die. That's what is going to happen with the body. And the reality of mind, that you all must be thinking about what happens to mind. Where is the mind in this? Whether the mind dies or not. The mind being the part of Panchaskanda. The mind being the part of a Panchaskanda has to come into existence and go. Rupa, Vedana, Sadhana, Sankhara, Vijnanam. The Vijnanam also has to, is subjected to the law of impermanence. What we call Chakku Vigyan, or what we call Sota Vigyan, or what we call Gana Vigyan, or whatever, they are all subjected to impermanence. Everything is subjected to impermanence, marked by impermanence. So they emerge depending on the causes and conditions. And when the causes and conditions are gone, they just disappear. Same with our mind, mana. So we cannot say that the mind survives from this body to that body. Similarly, we cannot say that aap survives or vayu survives from this body to that body. And there is nothing mysterious about consciousness. The consciousness is natural, like the elements in the world. So I think what we will do today, I will take a pause here because this is a very heavy discussion. And we will also continue in the next. And in the final thing, I'm going to summarize it so that all these doubts and all these things can be incorporated there. So let's open up the class for the discussion. Sorry for being this much heavy because the material is very heavy here. Anybody would like to say anything or comment on anything?
After a death, we know that our body is composed of elements, Prithvi, Aap, Tej, Vayu. And then after the death, these 4 elements are disintegrate, and then these 4 elements join. The
Yes.
same mass of floating elements. In space also, there are elements which are in floating state. So these 4 elements of the body which are released after death, they join the same mass of energy. Means Prithvi will be attached to Prithvi element and Vayu with Vayu. And when there is new, yeah.
That's what we have to understand, that these elements are also, in the Aap, all these 4 elements exist.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, they are not like 4 different elements, that there is Aap, there is Prithvi, there is Tej, and there is Vayu. In Vayu, there are all these elements but in different proportion.
Yes.
Just like you say solid, instead of calling it elements is also can be called elements, but we can call it characteristics of being solid. Okay, so what is solid? Having this heaviness. What is liquid? So you can say in terms of the properties that it has, because even the elements are not ultimate. Okay, even the elements are not ultimate, because if you look at it at the atomic level, or even I didn't want to go into this discussion of science and all, but we can take the help of science here. This all, water. What is it? What is the water made up of?
H2O.
H2O. What is H2 and what is O?
Hydrogen, 2 elements. And
what are they? They are gases, right?
Yeah, yes.
Right or not?
Yes.
Okay. And then what happened to the water when we freeze it? When we freeze the water, what happens?
Becomes solid.
Becomes solid.
Yeah.
Okay. It crystallizes and it becomes solid, right?
Yes.
We can take it in our hand. We can feel its shape.
Yeah.
Okay. What happens to water when we boil it?
Vapor. Heat.
Vapor. What is vapor?
Gaseous state.
Gaseous state. You see, so what we have to understand is, these things as a nature, solid, liquid, gases, and all. Okay. But ultimately, what is hydrogen? What is oxygen? If we go deeply into that, we go at the atomic level. Isn't it? And there is a limit how deep we can go into that, because then we go into the deeper into it, we are not certain whether it's a particle or energy. That's what, wave, whether it's a wave or it's particle, that's a dilemma.
Wave and particle, both.
Wave and particle. And we cannot say whether it's a wave or a particle unless you decide, you choose yourself what you want to see. So that's why, our perception comes into being. We decide whether we want to see it as a particle or wave. Isn't it? Then it goes into the quantum level and all. But, those who are interested into that, they can discuss it. But that's not our point. Our point is to prove what happens after death. What happens to the body when we die? How the energy, which is constantly produced in the body. We know, as a doctor, Alkatai, how the body produces energy constantly, right?
Yeah, metabolic, because of metabolism.
Because of metabolism.
Energy, energy.
Every cell of our body is producing energy, right?
Yes.
Isn't it? That's the basic function of body, to produce energy.
Yeah.
Isn't it? And now the scientists have gone into the level where they can explain how the various constituents of body are also produced. isn't it? So I think we have to bring this understanding to know what's happening in terms of, it's not that the water element escape from me and escape and goes into water, or because when we burn something, what happens? When we burn the body, what happens?
Turns into ashes.
Turns into
mostly.
ashes,
Yes.
right or not?
Yeah.
Yes.
What happens to our bones? What happens to our this thing? So if we say that our consciousness is separate from the body, then it can be withdrawn from the body and put it somewhere else, right?
No.
Isn't it? So the consciousness, very difficult from our consciousness to transform from one body to another body,
True.
because that's what Baba Sahib Ambedkar has explained, that the mind and body are codependent. That's what the Buddha said, that the mind and body are paticca samutpanna. If one emerges, another emerges. If one fall, another falls.
So, but Mangesh bhai,
Yes, Harish.
like, there's a thin line I couldn't understand, probably not even necessary at this point, but it's like, if I get hungry or I get thirsty or I get tired, who informs me? Is it the mind or is it my brain who informs me?
See, there is this big discussion going on about the duality of mind and body. Okay. Now, one view that is coming is that the body is called the embodied consciousness. That the consciousness has no location. Consciousness is spread throughout the body. It is not just brain. Okay. So there are now, as the doctors will explain, that there is the nervous system. The nervous system is spread throughout our body. Right, Alka ma'am?
Correct.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so it is not that the locus of consciousness is here or the mind is here. The whole body is embodied with consciousness.
And each cell of the body has subject to consciousness. It knows how to work.
So it's a tricky matter, Harsh bhai, but suffice here is to say that we are trying to understand the concept of rebirth.
Yeah.
Isn't it? We are trying to clear the ground for us.
Yeah, I
And
think rebirth topic, Alka madam has again and again reiterated in the group. I think still some people are confused. But if you go through Buddha and Dhamma, I think it was completely clear at that point itself. But
it's
still,
a
like,
confusing
people
topic.
are in that, yeah, because people are there in that concept of other Hindu religions or other religions. So that's why it's
Yes, yes.
confusing for them.
See
Yeah,
that
they
one? Okay.
deny all these things. Baba Sahib's views, they deny.
See what happens. There are a lot of these things like bhava, antarbhava, what happens between life and death. But these are all speculative. Okay, these are all speculative. And as Baba Sahib Ambedkar said, that the science is going to advance so much, and it has already advanced so much that it is answering a lot of the questions, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's already answering a lot of questions as to how our bodies are formed. They have analyzed from the day one what happens there, isn't it? How the the fetus senses something. What is the the reality of sensing something, isn't it? So these all things are there, and if I think a time will come, there will be a lot of empirical answer to what we are discussing today. Isn't it? There is already a view in science that the consciousness is natural, isn't it? It's not mysterious or it's not mystic. It is not something that's that's like God or something like that. It's very natural phenomena. And then now the science has gone on to prove that the different animals like octopus have a consciousness on a very different level. Then the birds have a consciousness on a very different level. Everything is conscious, is aware, isn't it? But do we talk about the rebirth of the snakes, the rebirth of cows, the rebirth of this thing? Very, very complicated matter, isn't it? So I think one day maybe we will have an answer to these questions, which seems out of reach today, but maybe one day.
Yeah, I think someone has even put, like, definitely, like, even our hearts or brain or maybe whole body vibrates at certain frequencies. So that is also still under like investigation or research is going on. That is also true, I guess.
What is
Mangesh,
verse number 10? When the four elements from this floating mass join together, a new birth takes place.
Okay.
10.
Yes.
When the
These words we have to understand, terminology we have to understand. Birth means what you see. Suppose, this morning I ate an apple. Okay, I ate an apple and say I ate a banana. Now, what happened to that banana and apple? It has produced energy in my body, right?
Converts
yes.
into some other chemicals and
Some other this thing it has been transformed. Now, when we look at the child, how our body grows? By taking the Prithvi, Aap, Tej, Vayu elements from outside and making our body, right? Right or wrong?
Yeah.
How does the child grow? If we don't feed a child, what will happen to a child? If we don't eat food, what will happen? Will we grow? So you see, your body is already, regenerating a lot of matter. We are already regenerating a lot of matter, aren't we?
Sir, we are talking about the metabolism of humankind.
Hmm.
This is true for our trees and animals also. Only the consciousness part we are not able to get from those what they kind of consciousness they are having to communicate with the others. Otherwise, they are in their ecology. They are communicating and they are getting the things.
See this.
And
Yes,
the
yes.
con- the concept of this living and the five elements also is true for them also.
Yes. There is only fundamental difference between the trees and animals. They both have life, but the trees have, what is called. They did not have this oxygen-based, system where they convert it into energy. They have a different system.
Yeah,
And
photosynthesis is there.
And because of photosynthesis, a lot of oxygen was released in the air. That's why we could come into being.
but I think Mangesh, I have seen some research papers or read something like in videos that there are certain cases where like even trees also communicate with each other, their own species also, and
They
they
might
can
be having
communicate through
some
their
other
roots.
way of communication for sure.
Yeah, the other way of either through their roots or maybe some other smell or something, we don't know.
Through
But
fungi,
I read,
they communicate through fungi.
yeah.
And the fungal world is more, this biomass is more than the trees. There, the whole ground, the whole earth inside is, covered by the fungus. And they help the trees to transfer material from each other. Anyway, that's not. Yes.
And the next stage will be more interesting to think over it regarding the rebirth of man and rebirth of all these animals and plants. It will give another dimension of thinking. How they are flourishing.
One small question.
Yes, Subhash bhai. Subhash bhai.
Yeah, we started with two beliefs. That is, one is the eternalist and another one is the annihilist. Well established. But here, Buddha was not eternalist, of course, very much clear. But on the other hand, Buddha was not also annihilist the way it is understood. So he clarified those things. Now I'm looking whether any name has been given what Buddha trying to tell, so that we should understand more clearly with proper name. It should not what is called nihilist or Uchedwadi. Buddha was not Cheyadi or neither eternal.
See, it's
And
called
the
middle.
name is given by our philosopher.
It's called Shunyata. If you want to, Buddha was a Shunyavadi. Okay, now if we want to explain it, we have to again go into the discussion. The Shunyavad is nothing but Madhyam Marga. Madhyam Marga is nothing but Paticha Samutpad. Okay, so we can go on explaining it. Now my point is, I'm going to explain for 2 minutes. I'm going to stop here for today. See, all the philosophies talk about substance. That there is a prime substance from which everything is made up of. Prime substance. This is the substance from which everything has originated. The Buddha was never believed in the substance philosophy. He saw that everything is in the process. Everything is changing continuously. One thing is making that thing because of this condition that is being done, because of that is coming into being. So Buddha saw everything in the world as a process. We human beings are a process. We are not substance. And when we take a view of being a substance, then the view of being eternal comes. But when we look at the world as a process, at all levels, at our body levels, at the level of the universe, at both micro level and macro level, when we see the world as a process, and it is a process, there is nothing fixed. Everything is constantly changing. Everything is transforming into something.
Evolution? Process means here evolution or
No. I think it's
we
a
are
flux
still
of
in
change. Like
evolving state.
You can say evolution in a biological
Yeah.
sense. In terms of the species, we can say evolution, and we can definitely bring the thinking of evolution into thinking about the human bodies. Okay, so
Energy we can say.
energy is, now if we want to go into that, then there are energies. What is energy? If the energy is just a word, but if we look at it into this sense of science and all, what is energy?